a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Hey!
Hey, Dylan.
How you doing, brother?
Great to meet you.
Great to meet you as well. I am super excited as I feel like we were just talking for the podcast. I felt like we were kindred spirits.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to hear about other people's travels where you have similar uncommon commonalities along a path. And you're like, oh, I'm super curious about like what got you to be interested in all these things. So like, I'd love to first kick things off with, how did you get started in the whole world of, the VR for good, creating meaningful applications?
I got a call from the mothership. About 4.5 years ago, I happened to try a VR device. I was looking for something to engage with my son Ziggy Stardust. He's 14 now. And at the time I went on Facebook, and at the time it was either PC VR or mobiles, and there wasn't really anything standalone. Mm-hmm. I got this cheap thing, put my phone in it. I couldn't figure it out. And I downloaded an app, and it happened to be a 360 tour of the International Space Station. And I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what to expect. I put this thing on my head, and my mind was transported to this environment, and it blew my mind. Looking back, it was only a mobile phone. It was only 360 tour, like in comparison to other experiences now in virtual reality, relatively tame, if you like. But going in, not knowing what to expect, having that experience, it literally dropped me to my knees. I sat really quietly on my sofa for a few minutes, digesting what had just happened, and couldn't believe that my phone had done that. Mm-hmm. And also that I'd missed that technology was already at the stage. And so that, I don't know, you ever had the moment, like it's kind of a cliche, but there's a moment that changes your life. And I can look back and point to that moment. Something happened in that moment. A light bulb went on, and I was teaching as a college lecturer, English and teacher trainer at the time. Working with refugees and migrant workers and language learners. And something went click in my mind. I was like, I can use this to teach. And beyond teaching, I can use this to learn for myself. This is a new paradigm of learning. If I can transport my mind and my consciousness into experiences and design experiences and put them into minds, there's something there. So I just dove headlong into that. And ever since then, it's been... I know your podcast is about the hero's journey, and allies just kept showing up, right? Wow. And doors just kept opening. And so you find yourself at the precipice of like, do I walk away from an open door, or do I take this leap? And I just kept leaping, and, things kept showing up, and we can get into all of the details, but that's how it all started. I got a call from the mothership. That was it.
I love that. That moment for people that are VR believers, or whatever you want to call the type of people, you get that moment. I've had the same experience when I, backed Oculus on Facebook, on Kickstarter. The headset came in, I put it on for the first time, and my mind was blown. And it was like a Zelda game. Someone took a Zelda game, the Zelda graphics, and just very cheaply cut them, the 2D sprites, and put them on the sides and had them standing up. And I was like, oh my God. That sense of awe, that sense of this is possible too, it expands in your mind what is capable of happening in this world. And it's like nothing will ever be the same again. And then you say, how do I become a part of this world? How do I learn? How do I integrate myself into this world? And what I love about this is that you took this shift, right? You took this shift into, how do I use this for teaching? How do I use this to get out of my mind into this experience and get this experience into other people's minds to really shift people's behaviors. Because really education is really about learning new skill sets and learning new tools. And
Right.
one of the best means is virtual reality. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you use VR for education?
Yeah. So, I mean, from that early beginning, I like I said, I jumped in.
Yeah.
And I was amazed by how open the community was. Like I started searching Facebook groups and Twitter handles and hashtags and LinkedIn groups, just joining everything, learning and reading, and YouTube channels and stuff like that. And I would ask questions and get answers back. And now I know they were some of the CEOs of companies. And I was just asking a question, but the community was so open and generous and welcoming. And so as an educator, I found groups on Facebook, VR, AR in education. So joined that. And it was great. It's like, here's a Facebook group. Great. Then I discovered social VR. Like my first experience, I didn't realize that you could meet other people in this platform, right?
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, what? We can have meetings, we can meet other people and stuff like that. So why are we on Facebook? Why are we as educators, why don't we have a group or a community on the social platform? So I created my very first event 4 years ago, almost a day now. And I just called it Educators in VR. Anybody interested in meeting up to discuss virtual reality and applications and use cases for education training. And the response was amazing. And on that first call, I met my co-founder, Laurel. And ever since then, we just like shook hands like, hey, let's do more of this. So we started from one event to one event a month, 2 events a month. Now we're doing probably 8, 9, 10 events a week. And over 4 years, we've done 3,500 events. And we've done some big conferences. But back to your question, how do we use it? So partly we use VR to grow a community, to discuss how this can be used in virtual reality in education. And we invite speakers who are either doing something interesting or pioneering or unusual or have a particular app. So we don't do like pay to play stuff, but if we're interested enough to reach out to them, they get to talk about that. And we base it around questions and applications rather than it being a pitch for a particular company and application. And then it took us a while to realize, like, you can invite speakers in and then you'll get speakers and likely presentations. But really, this is a whole new medium. Why would we want to do PowerPoint presentations when we can design the whole world as an interactive presentation? So it was that whole journey. So we kind of specialize in the multi-user and social VR use cases and application for education training, just because that we're building a community.
Yeah.
But there are many fantastic single user apps that we talk about and explore and share and stuff.
Single user is great, but there is a thing I've had it because I've been in VR for almost a decade now, right? And there's a thing where you do VR for a while and then you kind of get jaded at some stuff, right? And then something else blows your mind and you're like, I'm back in it, right? For me, it was that social VR. I was at, I think, Oculus Connect 2 or 3, and it was the toy room demo box thing. And I was there and I put on a headset and I saw another person across the way and there's all these toys in front of us. And I was like, he's like, hey, my name's this. I was like, are you a real person? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, you're a real person. And I just started grabbing stuff and throwing it at him. Just, it was so fun. It was the most amazing. I was like, wow. I said, okay. So then that's when we started only focusing on multiplayer as well, because you feel the power of presence of having those interactions. Even though there's just toys, I felt like a 3-year-old in a playpen throwing things, just having a great time. So can you talk to me just a little bit about some of the magic that you experience inside the social VR?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So for a bit of context, what we're both talking about, and a friend of mine calls it juice, right? Whether it's single user or multi-user, what we're really looking for, I call it depth, like depth in VR, because you can get surface VR. There's lots of surface VR and that's fine. But then there are interactions, experiences, small things for me that go deep, where I like, okay, I'm surprised, or something engaging. My friend calls it juice, call it depth, call it transformation, whatever. And so applied to multi-user, it starts with letting yourself, when you're new, you have to let yourself be vulnerable to be in a situation that's kind of new and a bit kind of, I don't know what to expect. You have to just jump in, right? When it's your first time to social VR. I remember the first time, what have I got to lose? I walk up to somebody and ask them, hey, I'm new here. How does this work? And everybody will help you out. So once you kind of just jump in and find that nothing bad's going to happen, the worst thing is you're going to take your headset off. This is boring, or I didn't like that, or something like that. You're uncomfortable. But you do kind of get invested. And then I guess what's different is on a video call, we have voice and we have image and it's flat. But once I can walk around somebody, or like you said, I can pick something up and throw them at them, there's a different level of agency and investment with that. And then almost immediately you feel personal space, right? Personal space is really, I don't know if you've noticed this, and being a decade in VR, I'm sure you have. But if you're in VR, subconsciously, you will not get too close to another avatar. It's only zeros and ones, but that shit matters. Excuse my language. That matters as much in VR as it does in the real world. I know if I step too close, sorry, I'll back off. Or if an avatar like walks through my avatar, hey, that was rude. So we talk about the moments of magic. Sometimes the magic is actually something uncomfortable, like another avatar walking through you. It's uncomfortable, but it's like, oh my God. It reminds you, right?
It feels like a ghost. Real quick, Jimmy, what's up, buddy? It's good to see you, brother. He said there's no better look than seeing Dylan with a sense of awe. What up, Jimmy? It's good to see you, man. It's a pleasure. He is a fellow journeyer with me, and and into that. But I want to acknowledge him because he put a comment in there. Sometimes we get comments and feeds. We'll bring them on, say what's up to them. Having people come into your space is weird. I was never a fan of 360 video, right? And there was one time it actually worked to my advantage where I did a sexual harassment training video, right? And I was, I don't know, a girl or male, or it could be someone, but I'm sitting down and I'm stuck in this space in the 360 video, and this dude walks up and he's like, like a water cooler talk, and I'm sitting down and he comes up into my space. And the thing is, but with 360, you can't move around, you can't leave. So I am tethered to the ground. And I was like, bro, get out of my face. And it was so, but it gave me empathy. It gave me empathy of what that would feel like to have somebody in your face when you feel locked down and trapped. And so it was a good use case of using the constraints to actually create something that created more of an impact than I would versus I would just normally just slide back. And it didn't happen. So, so the multiplayer-ness, we're talking about people go into your space and you go through it. It's that sense of presence, that sense of, I need certain area to breathe. But you could, and that's what feels, one of the things that does feel amazing about that is if you're in like a little tiny room or tiny space, you could put your headset on and be in a vast landscape, forest, clearing, valley, or whatever. And it creates that, and your mind, it naturally just kind of releases and goes,
Yeah, I remember when I was working at college, I got into 360 cameras and I took the camera to the beach. I just stood it literally in the shallow water and recorded 5 minutes. I didn't think much of it, loaded it to my headset, took it back to college, showed it to a colleague who was quite highly strung. I didn't think much of it. I was just showing them something. You can have a look at this video. And they put the headset on and they just went quiet. Their shoulders dropped. It was like, oh my God, I'm standing in the water at the beach. And the whole energy just shifted just for the sake of, it was a sunny day at the beach, waves rolling. It's like, oh, and they like from not buying into VR very much to just having that like short experience. That was a magical moment for them. And it's interesting because you're an evangelist, I can tell, and you're like, you've been around the block a few times with this. I'm curious to know if you share this. I am so I guess, passionate about VR, that I take great responsibility in how I introduce it to people who are new. Because when you watch on YouTube, like the memes and the funnies about VR, is people running at a wall or getting scared or getting nauseous, jumping off Richie's plank or roller coasters. Kind of bugs me. And sure, it's fun, right? It's fun. But if that's your first experience, you might not come back for years because it turns you off. It's like, oh yeah, I know VR. That's that. I didn't like it. Not for me.
Yeah.
But the opportunity to show somebody, even just first steps on the Oculus store, right? That training video, or a day at the beach, or all of these other apps that when you've been in VR, maybe you take for granted, but there are some fantastic, very accessible applications and experiences that for somebody who's never tried VR, you show them that, it's like, bing, oh, wow, I could use it like this. I could use it like that. And so it's really important to me to bring people in that route.
100% agree.
Yeah.
When I have demoed a number of times, and I've demoed to a bunch of all ranges of ages. When I demo to especially younger kids, teenagers, we'll just say 13 and above, as we demo this, there's a thing that happens that I kind of be hyper aware of, is when they put on a headset, the other people feel left out of the party because they're inside the headset. And so what they'll do is they'll poke them or they'll mess with them. And the one thing I'm hyper protective is like, look, this is a very sensitive space. They're being very vulnerable. You're poking someone who's vulnerable right now. And that's not a good thing to do, because they can't let themselves go and experience the magic, which means when you go into it, someone else is going to try to rob you of that thing as well. So how about we break that cycle? We have to give everybody some space. Well, you're going to have an amazing time, and I'm going to make sure you're safe. Like I'm going to make sure that he's safe. And so let's do this. And that's because it's a very powerful situation to be aware of, especially if
I don't know if you were about to say it's a sacred space, but I actually would use that word. So there's something about it. And for me, a bit of a broader context of my journey, I guess. I started meditating when I was around 17. And I had some early experiences that just made me realize, wow, I can interface with my mind. Here's a protocol I can go, I can breathe, I can, bring my mind to focus or to rest to a certain degree. And it lets me influence my mind. And so that's been with me all my life. A year or two later, I smoked my first joint. And the experience was, I can interface with my mind. Very different from meditation, but genuinely still an interface. I have a level of interaction with my mind and my consciousness. And then breathing, different breathing techniques did that for me. So I throughout from the age of 17, I've always been interested in different ways of interfacing with my mind and my consciousness. That's the broader context for this. VR comes along, and it's another interface for the mind for me. That's the primary interest for me in VR, is that. But because it's like very, very visual, it's like so in your face. It's like with meditation, you can learn to visualize. And you can go on mind journeys and using hypnosis and stuff like that. Depending on your level of skill with visualization, that can be clearer or less in focus. But in VR, it's digital. It's like super crisp clear with a 3D space. You could meditate all your life and not reach that level of visual clarity. Of course, you lose other things from that you can access with meditation, and it's by no means the same thing. But the point is being able to interface the mind. For me, all of those things are, for want of a better word, sacred or spiritual. There's an element of that.
Absolutely. There is this energy that I think certain people acquire, and I feel it with you and it's with me as well, about being a seeker, someone that is seeking, trying to understand themselves, curious about, the inner landscapes of the minds, the outer landscapes of reality, how we interact with this world, what what's going on, and seeking and going inwards to understand, we try to figure out what tools and technologies can we use to really help us understand ourselves better, whether it is plant medicines or VR technologies or meditation or any of these types of things. They're all assistants to help us understand and uncover the truth of that aha moment of, oh, that's what this means. And then how do we integrate that into our lives? And VR meditation, I feel, is almost like, it's not the same thing, like training wheels with meditation. Instead of visualizing, you have this environmental recreation around you that is a little bit more stable, a little bit more real, a little bit more solid. So instead of you trying to imagine it, and maybe you don't have those skill sets, it can kind of keep you on those railroad tracks and keep you on a certain path, getting you from where you're at to where you want to go.
I agree. I mean, there are many different definitions for meditation and mindfulness. And I feel that VR can lend itself very well to guided mindfulness or journeys where you know, but actually my preferred type of meditation is with eyes closed. So I don't actually use VR much for meditation. I kind of meditate by myself. I'm more likely to listen to an audio guided journey and let my mind do the work. But I think VR is still, I mean, it's not a new medium. It's been around for decades, but the content that we're still exploring, we're still understanding how to best apply it to certain use cases. And I feel that we're still have a lot of exploration to do with applying this technology to mindfulness and meditation. And I think we're going to discover aspects of it that are going to blow us away.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. And this is just new tools, new technologies to get them from where we're at to where we want to go. And looking at, when you talk about this, you talk about doing, you're like, oh, we're in Facebook. Why are we in Facebook? We should do this inside of virtual reality. Right. Can you talk to me just a little bit more about some of the benefits, some of the ways by meeting up in a social shared space, there's benefits? Can you talk to me about what makes it different than, say, a Facebook group?
Yeah, so I was actually just meeting with a bunch of people earlier. We're doing a particular build in a platform called Engage. And we've met a few times. And we're likely going to be meeting in the real world sometime next year. And one of the people remarked, I wonder what it's going to be like when we meet in the real world for the first time. And I've had that situation a couple of times where I've been working with friends, like people who I consider life friends, and I've only ever interacted with them either on a video screen or in VR. And then earlier this year, I met them in the real world. And what struck me was how comfortable I already felt with them, like how much of a reference. When you meet somebody for the first time, you're building references, you're finding touch points. Yeah, and that had all been established. Like, he picked me up at the airport, this guy, a friend of mine, Chris.
Yeah.
Pulled up, I sat down in the car next to him, looked over, I was like, yeah, this could be in VR, you know, just an avatar and stuff like that. And in VR, we have been flying around in various different ways.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, yeah, fly me in your car, dude. And it was literally pick the car up and fly me to your apartment. It was just hilarious. And funnily, his car's license plate was OBJ. And that was just the joke for the rest of the trip. It was like, that was the joke. Fly me in your OBJ.
Yeah. For anybody that doesn't know, an OBJ is an object. It's something that you can import that actually creates a space, an object. So if you're a building, a car, an element, so it's an object, and so it's
think of a PDF, but a 3D version of that file format is an OBJ, and you can pick OBJs up and fly.
Yo, 100%.
But so the advantages or the benefits of social VR is that the familiarity, the level of closeness you have with someone, and so on Facebook is fantastic. The internet, Twitter, any social media platform is fantastic because essentially they can connect. They can lessen the degrees of separation, right? We think 30, 40 years back, I didn't know what was going on in Indonesia or in Kathmandu or in Siberia. But now I can go in a chat room or a social media platform, and I can interact with anybody anywhere, which is amazing already. And now do that in a space, provide a digital space where I can do that in. And not only can I meet that person in that space, but I can manipulate that space to be the surface of the moon, or underwater, or the top of Mount Everest, or the jungle. I can choose where I want to meet. You can design experiences that are just impossible, and you can connect with an extra depth as well. So when we do projects with teachers from around the world, I know they come from Fiji, Iceland, Sao Paulo, Japan, and here we are all in a room, and it feels like a room. And avatars can be more or less realistic, but if the experience is good enough, your mind will just accept it. It will suspend disbelief. Just, okay, this is good enough for me. This is a space, and these are real people, and I get on with that interaction. And I have memories. Can I tell you a short little story, for example?
Yeah, please.
When I first got into PC VR, which is a VR that requires a gaming computer to kind of power, I got the Oculus CV1 for Christmas. I was just looking for an experience to buy it, and I got it. And one of the first things I tried was Google Earth VR, which is an amazing tool. So Google Earth is cool, but Google Earth VR is that, but you can fly everywhere, right down, and it feels like you're flying everywhere. You have the whole planet. And my wife had bought us a ticket to go to Gran Canaria. I'd never been there. It's a little island off the west coast of Africa. So I thought I'd do some research. And so in Google Earth VR, I live in the UK. I found my way to Manchester Airport, runway B, because that's where the plane takes off. So I'm sitting there in my headset on the runway. Then I take off the runway, fly over my house, because that's the route, and I find Gran Canaria. I land there. And I land on Gran Canaria Airport. I said, okay, I probably have to take the bus. Found out where the bus would go. And I did this whole research, about 2 hours. And in VR, I went, because it's a volcano, I went up this road, and I went around the north face, and everywhere I traveled. I knew the island inside out. A couple of months later, we actually flew to Gran Canaria. And I remember sitting in the plane on the runway thinking, I've been here before, and flew the route. Anyway, we spent a fantastic 10 days in Gran Canaria in this motorhome driving around, and drove many of the roads that I've researched. 2 years later, we were recalling this journey. And I said to my wife, one of my favorite days is when we drove around the north coast. And she says, we never went to the north. We stayed in the south. I said, what do you mean? Sure we did. I remember it was this steep thing. And I only have that memory from Google Earth. It was so real. I conflated it with the actual memories that I'd had with my family. Nuts.
That's awesome. But that's the thing, is that we remember things through spatial memory. We learn by moving through an environment. And that's why the memory palace or any of these other things that are out there work so well, because we map the terrain in our mind, and we move through that terrain, and that creates a memory. And what's so powerful about that is that's incredible. I've had some amazing memories with friends, some epic moments with people inside of virtual reality, like Rec Room, where I was fighting these guys, and my friend's down. He's like, come save me. I'm trying to fight all the bad guys. He's like, high five me. And I barely make it, high five him. And then we come back and we win. But I have that memory of being there at that place, in that dungeon, doing that thing with my friends. And you still have all the same moments. You're suspending of disbelief. That statement that you said there about suspending disbelief, when it's good enough, people feel that it needs to look like me and you. It needs to be hyper realistic. It needs to have skin and pores to make it look realistic. Good enough. And for yourself, when you talk about educating in VR, and you talk about, we have the old PowerPoint system that we do now, but we can do so much more. Talk to me about, like, what more can we do to add to this reality when we're in this shared space together?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as an educator, I might want to teach students or learners about, let's say, the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin.
Okay.
Right? As a really important location that played a key part in the history of the last century. And if I'm doing this in class and I'm a particularly innovative teacher, I might have a little model in the classroom with my students, and I might show them a video on YouTube. I might play an audio recording of Ronald Reagan saying, come take this wall down, or whatever. And so there's already a bunch of media that, as an educator, you can access, and all of them are valid. And sometimes just audio would be really powerful, right? But if I have a massive budget, I might fly my students out there and might go spend a weekend. It would probably cost me 20, 30 grand to get everybody out there with the insurance and then, field trips. But with virtual reality, for the price of a couple of headsets, I can create a class, bring them in. We can essentially visit that place. We can immerse ourselves on the place of the Brandenburg Gate. We can walk through it. We can bring a model of Ronald Reagan in, or we can play the video inside there. We can have a tank rolling, animated by. We can essentially have soldiers' avatars on, the clothing of soldiers' avatars. And then, so it doesn't replace the YouTube video. It doesn't place the audio. It doesn't place just a good old map. Where did maps go? I miss paper maps, right? But it can add layers. Mm-hmm. And the important thing is that I can do that for students who are in the classroom with me, so we can go on a field trip. But if I'm a teacher, I can be giving that lesson to kids, and I don't even need to know where they are. The learners can be from anywhere in the world, as long as they've got an internet connection and a device. They can join me in that lesson. And so educators that are embracing this technology can spark creativity, curiosity, awe, wonder, imagination in minds around the globe, not just in your classroom, not locally, but you can do this around the globe. And that's amazing.
I love that. Yeah, it's the combination of you can have anybody from around the world be inside your shared presence space, experiencing a virtual in-person lesson, but do it with anybody. As long as you have the tools, technology, and internet connection, you're ready to rock.
Right.
With that, what are some, I would call, threshold guardians on the hero's journey? What are some difficulties or challenges that you face as an educator or being a part of the virtual world society? What about these things? What is difficult to really bring people into this space? What are some challenges that you currently face?
Yeah, the firewall. in the college, it's often the firewall.
I totally hit that.
So that's, I joke about it, but if you're
it's a real thing,
college, you have to do that. Have to make the IT department have to make them your friend, because I love IT guys because they can enable you as an educator, right? But many IT people are not aware of VR as an educational tool. They might have, they've heard of it, but it's just still very niche. And so you need, so as an educator, that's, having allies to make it happen for you. And really, you kind of still have to be the champion yourself. Yeah. When you're talking about smart boards or tablets, or that's the kind of tools that the IT department knows and they can help you with. When they're talking about VR, a lot of it is still new and unknown for them. So they have to, so that's one thing. To a degree, content is an issue. I'm on two minds about it, because on the one hand, busy educators, really, when we're talking about large scale deployment and mass adoption, most educators don't have the time to learn enough to create or find. They need to be given it on a plate in a way that they can handle. And we're not there yet. So content. But my experience was that learn it just enough to be dangerous. Get a 360 camera, I can learn that. So so your question was about the threshold guardians. I think part of it is your own fear, your willingness to jump in, make mistakes, figure it out, not have too high expectations, not be afraid to make mistakes, push yourself beyond that initial frustration, ask for help. That was my experience, ask for help. So threshold guardians, I'm trying to imagine.
No, all those make sense in terms of threshold guardians, right? You have the technical, and then you have the actual interpersonal threshold guardians. You have the social threshold guardians and not willing to ask for help pieces. So all the ones resonate and make sense with me. I've had the firewall experience. I'm actually I got to leave this early because I have to go demo, and I got to go to a place, and I don't know if the internet's going to work, and it's a social demo. So I'm going there early to test it out. So literally what you're talking about, because there's a pop-up for the place I'm going to and a sign in, and I don't know if the headset's going to allow me to do that. And so I'm literally going to go in this podcast in a couple of minutes here, because I have to go and do that early. So, so I find out. So you are a nail on the head with that. With what we're talking about right now, and you've done a lot of work in the educators in VR, and you've done a ton of time, thousands and thousands of events, the virtual world society, all this stuff. What is your holy grail? What is your flag in the sand? What is the thing that you hope to achieve by all of the effort you're putting into this direction?
To help people, as many people, understand that while this is a fantastic gaming console and gaming technology, there are layers of depth and meaning that you can miss if that's the only thing you perceive it to be. So I guess to open and further the conversation around depth and meaning in VR, to explore depth and meaning in VR, whatever shape or form that takes, whether it's a single user application, social VR, depth and meaning. And meaning can be community, can be creativity, it can be an income, right? People now, YouTubers, podcasters, creators, the internet has given us a huge opportunity to generate income and value for people. And so the three-dimensional internet, spatial web, metaverse, whatever you want to call it, is going to add that, is already adding that opportunity. And I want, with my organizations, Virtual World Society and Educators in VR, we want to make sure that this is made, it's democratized, that everybody can be part of that wealth generation and that opportunity, and that we want kids from Bangladesh to create an amazing app and create value and support their community with that. We want kids from Alaska to win awards for events that they run in VR. We want educators from Nigeria to create a virtual university and a virtual PhD. And we want families from Navajo, Cherokee Nation to build communities that solve world peace. This tool is really for everyone. And when aliens land, we want them to feel welcome too.
They'll go put on a human avatar to feel welcomed, you know?
Exactly. Maybe that's what VR chat is, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, so if that's the goal, if that's the holy grail, if that's that flag in the sand, what's the dragon? What is the thing that is seemingly so difficult to overcome? You might need to transform, the people might need to transform to get there.
I guess putting up with friction and the distraction of the shiny toy, right? We need the shiny toy to start the conversation, but then we need to get beyond the shiny toy. And by shiny toy, I mean what do I mean? I'm not going to define the shiny toy. I just mean that I guess the word metaverse is a good example, right? We have this word. Nobody knows what it means. It doesn't really exist yet, but everybody's shouting about it. And that's fine, because for me, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And like the Aborigines, we have to sing our own maps into existence, right? Song lines. We have to sing this metaverse into existence together. It'll be what it'll be, but we need this conversation. And so for me, the word metaverse is a very useful thing. But at the same time, we can't get so caught up in it that we forget that we get just stuck on that one thing.
Yeah.
And depth and meaning can be quiet, individual, personal, things that you can easily miss. So training people to slow down in VR. A friend of mine, Chris Madsen, mentioned this in passing. Yeah, a lot of people go too fast in VR, and they miss those moments of depth, or he calls them juice. And it can be a little thing. And so fighting in the corner of the little quiet things that we need to explore and let settle in, whilst we're kind of being overwhelmed with the narrative of metaverse and all of this. I think that's the dragon, that we overlook the subtler aspects.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing, is that people get so excited and then they kind of eat a whole bunch on all the shiny candy of VR, and they put it away, right? It's like constant consuming versus stopping and looking at a flower for hours, you know.
And it's also okay, because we need all of that. We need the people on the sugar rush to go charge ahead, right? And then we need the more reflective people to process and help us digest that and formulate that.
Yeah, it's the spectrum of humanity, you know.
It is. That's the beauty of it.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Just trying to think. So please check out the Virtual World Society. It's an organization working to make VR accessible, democratized, for impact and social connection. Please check out the virtualworldsociety.org. That's the website. Feel free to join. Membership is free, and we hold community events. Feel free to check out educatorsinvr.com. There's also a free community. But most of all, take your time with VR. Allow for a bit of frustration. People want the whole thing on a platter right now. And it's an exciting journey. And the frustration is part of what then motivates people to build cool stuff. So be patient with VR, and be patient with the metaverse, and let it crystallize around us into existence as we speak.
Love it. Yeah. It's beautiful. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Daniel at virtualworldsociety.org is probably the best way. I'm on LinkedIn, Daniel Dyboski-Bryant. I'm on Twitter at Daniel D. Bryant. You can find me that way, but email is probably best if you want to reach me.
Awesome. Daniel, it was an honor and pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Have a blessed and beautiful day. I'll see you on the other side.
Dylan, good luck with your Threshold Guardian.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciation.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes Quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other